Hello, and welcome back. My name's Kamosa, and I'm glad to have you here. Today, we're going to be doing something a bit different than the norm. I'm going to try my hand at a reaction, and the reason is because this particular video piqued my interest. It is from Wrath of Math. It is called The Most Frustrating Customer Service Call of All Time. I used to work in customer service, a bit of lore for you. It's not fun. Granted, it's a job. You're not going to be going over there for a quiet conversation, but it can be very frustrating, not only for the people dealing with customer service, but also for the agents in general to be going through these calls and dealing with understandably frustrated customers, depending on what exactly you're doing and the context behind just the whole thing in general. It's not exactly a walk in the park for anybody. It's mental gymnastics for one. It's trying to get to the bottom of a solution. And oftentimes it ends up being just lost in translation, just stupidness happening. Not to say that any one particular party is stupid. It's hard. As for what I did specifically, my first role was kind of like a tech support for proprietary software. Then I moved over sometime later into a health-related thing regarding the elderly, and then I moved over to work benefits for health, travel, and all the like, and then came full circle with tech support again, but it was a completely different breed of tech support. I'm sorry I cannot go into further detail on those specifically. NDAs and all that are still active and they're a pain, so I don't want to get in trouble. But like I said, this piqued my interest. I was just going to watch this on my off time, but figured I'd do a reaction to it. If you want to see more of this specific content, let me know. And otherwise, I implore you to subscribe to Wrath of Math's channel, give them a subscription, give the video a thumbs up, and give their video a view, just so that way this reaction doesn't take a view away from them. And without further ado, let's get into it. I have no idea what's going to happen. I'm a little nervous.
It's December 7th, 2006. In Australia, it's launch day for the Nintendo Wii in North.
Also, I will be pausing from time to time. I apologize if that's not your thing. If there's one thing I've heard tech support being very challenging for, it's for video games and video game stores. Especially if it's a video game store that stocks these things in physically and take in repairs or refurbishments. Oof. People are very unkind when it comes to their hobbies in regards to customer service. Which, I mean, I understand it's a hobby, but you could chill a bit, but we'll keep watching.
West London, a tornado swept through Kensal Green.
Oh my.
Police in Phoenix, Arizona had just announced they had the baseline serial killer in custody. And 350 miles west, in sunny San Diego, California, George Vaquero was writing his first blog post, in which he was about to begin a 5-day-long battle to get his phone carrier Verizon to understand very basic mathematics. This is his story.
Before we proceed, I almost got a customer service job. Or I almost considered getting a customer service job with Verizon. It wasn't working for them directly, it was through a third party. But actually, pretty much all of my jobs were through third parties. They weren't direct with whoever they were with. But Verizon was on the list of places I was going to apply to. It was for a sales position. After this video, I'm wondering if after this video, will I have made the right call to have not done that? I don't know. We'll see.
Here on out, okay?
Thanks.
All right. Thanks, Trent. Good evening, George. How are you doing this evening?
Great. Except that I've been trying to resolve this for 2 calls in over 45 minutes now.
Okay, well, let's see what we got here. I'm definitely sorry to hear that you've had a call on that many times.
Okay, really quick. This is something you'll often hear if you have to go through multiple calls. So, in customer service, it's one call resolution, first call resolution, I think they call it. They want to resolve your issue as quickly as possible, and that's understandable. That's kind of the job, and that's also what you want as the customer. You don't want to go through all of the rigmarole of this person, then this person, then this person, transfer to this department, transfer that to that department, transfer over to a completely different field, and only to be transferred to the same person because there was a mistake. It happens. Unfortunately, it's a normal thing that does happen, especially if you have new hires. But in the event that you get transferred at any point to a different department or even to a different agent that may be a step higher or maybe on the same level, but just with different training, we have to apologize. So this line, I'm definitely sorry to hear that. That is, I'm sure in some small capacity, the agent does feel like some level of remorse and sympathy, but it is something we're usually told to tell people is, apologize for something that you are not, that is not relevant to you, that you had no hand in, and use that as rapport to let people know that you care. But people these days know you don't care. But anyway, let's see where this goes.
Looks like you're requesting some kilobyte usage that was done while in Canada.
Well, let me just start out with a basic question.
Oh boy.
Do you recognize that there's a difference between $0.002 and $0.002?
Yes. Hang on, let me go back to that. $0.002, $0.002. Yes. There's isn't it like a very small mathematical thing? I must apologize in advance. I never did anything great in regards to mathematics, but yeah. I don't know what the exact difference is because I'm not a mathematician, but common sense would dictate there's a difference between 0.002 cents and $0.002. It's a fraction of dollars versus a fraction of cents, which a cent in and of itself can be considered a fraction of a dollar. And the same is true for any currency, but that's just common sense.
That there's a difference between $0.002 and $0.002?
You'd be forgiven for feeling insulted by such an elementary question at the beginning of a phone call, the difference between dollars and cents. But if it was elementary to the Verizon customer service team, then George wouldn't have already gone through nearly an hour of telephone rigmarole before getting to talk to Mike, the supervisor, and deciding it'd be a good idea to get this call on tape. Here's George's problem that the Verizon customer service reps have hitherto failed to understand. George is a Verizon customer who had the unlimited phone plan in the United States. However, he recently spent time in Canada and knew he'd have to pay a different rate during his time across the border.
Makes sense.
Before crossing the border, he called Verizon's customer service to figure out how much he'd have to pay for voice and data while in Canada. The customer service rep told him the rate was 0.002 cents per kilobyte. Since George has the unlimited plan in the United States, he doesn't have a point of comparison to determine if this rate is cheap or expensive. But he is surprised by it and asks the rep to confirm that the rate in Canada is indeed 0.002 cents per kilobyte.
Already, this is a can of worms. I'm not going to pretend like I know exactly what the line of thinking is going to be, but already this is a can of worms, and this is something I would try to avoid having to answer, partly because I wouldn't know specifically, because you're kind of veering into the world of currency conversion. You're not gonna you're not going to immediately know CAD to USD and vice versa, especially if you reside in one country compared to the other. And back when I used to do the first IT job, my role specifically was to just help out with navigating the proprietary software. Again, I'm sorry I can't go into details, but the software, it wasn't exactly like confusing, but we did have older customers, like of the elderly persuasion, and even a bit younger who couldn't navigate properly and who wanted to just figure out how to use the thing and figure out how to enter their data the exact way they wanted to and exact way they needed to. Part of that involved things like currency conversion, things like, I don't know, just specifics that are out of my field. And in that job, we were told, I apologize, I do not know this at present. And if we had the option, we could transfer to someone from, I don't know, like sales or regional sales or whichever, who could help, who could answer that question. So I'm pretty sure this is not going to be like what that is. But this also leans into this thing of, and specifically leans into the thing I tried to avoid, being answering questions that don't need to be answered because they will bloat the phone call's length. So in a phone call, you have what's called average handle time, and it changes depending on the company. I don't have a specific standard for what the average handle time across all customer service is, but I'm used to seeing things like just handle it less than 15 minutes. Ideally, you would handle things less than 8 minutes or 6 minutes, pardon me. And answering questions like these would cause this whole thing. And instead of being honest and saying, I don't know, I'm not natively going to do a currency conversion, if you try to answer and then you give a stupid answer, not only are you obviously going to look stupid, but then you're going to give the customer more questions. But maybe I'm overthinking it. Let's see what the rest of this is.
The rep confirms the rate, and George, seemingly uneasy about this, has the rep note this quoted rate in his account. With this quoted rate on record, the stage is set for Verizon's unforgettable blunder. During his time in
Interesting that you can make a note in someone's account. From what I've seen and heard in both the work I've done and places that are adjacent, even to this, making a note on an account usually just equates to the case that was opened for your call having a comment or a footnote on there saying the customer had requested the specific quote for the currency conversion between Canada and the United States. And it is notated as this or some other way that's put more eloquently than my speech can enable. But that should not really be like a thing to reference, especially if you've got an unlimited plan where it doesn't even matter anyway. But his curiosity, yeah, that pretty much is going to lead to the downfall of this, because you have to make a case note. It's not necessarily going to be an on the account thing. It's going to be on the case thing. And so the next person he calls is going to be able to directly reference that case if their software wills it, to see that quote, So you should write these things down if you're requested, because the customer requested it, of course, but that's going to be there for every single person who he calls or who he's ever transferred to see. And that's going Gonna be interesting.
Canada. Relieved by the affordable rates, George uses 35,893 kilobytes of data, which is charged on his bill. At the quoted rate of 0.002 cents per kilobyte, one doesn't need to be a mathematician nor a unit analysis expert of any repute to calculate George's bill. When we do the multiplication, the kilobytes cancel out, and we're left with an amount in cents. Grabbing a calculator to run the numbers, George owes 71 or 72 cents. But Verizon didn't charge him 72 cents. No, they charged him 100 times that. 100 times the rate they quoted him. How could they make this mistake?
Because
$0.002?
Do you recognize that there's actually...
0.002 cents.
Yes, do you recognize there's a difference between those two numbers?
Oh no. It was a misquote.
Well, that explains it.
Yep.
Somehow, everybody involved in communication with George up to this point doesn't realize that dollars and cents are different.
This whole thing is screaming just miscommunication from the start. If he would have been quoted properly the first time, none of this would have happened.
Of course, they'd never say exactly that, but to think $0.002 and $0.002 cents are the same is to equate dollars and cents.
Right.
Imagine being George in this situation, where you wonder how you could have possibly been charged 100 times more than you expected based on what Verizon told you. Then you call them, and every customer service rep you speak to thinks dollars and cents are the same.
My God,
but somehow,
they're all
George maintains
stupid.
patience, hopeful that every new person he gets on the line will be Verizon's very own Isaac Newton.
You know what I think? And I'm not trying to be an apologist for the agents, although I do sympathize with them for like other scenarios, like angry customers that are slinging insults when they shouldn't be and whatnot. It's very easy to get caught up in your script and get caught up in the moment when you're explaining something. That being said, if you're in a role that permits you to quote pricing to your customers, be very careful about the quote. If you're not, this is going to happen. And it's stupid. But here we are.
No.
Okay, is there a difference between $2 and 2 cents?
Well, yes, there is.
Okay, so is there a difference between $0.002 and $0.002 cents?
Say yes, please.
$0.002 and $0.002 cents.
Yes. Is
Oh
there a
my
difference
God.
between...
They're both the same if you look at them on paper-wise.
No, they're not, actually.
Paper-wise.
Is $0.5 the same as 0.5
He's got to
cents?
keep rounding up. He's going to keep rounding up because
$0.5.
Is a half a
That
dollar...
would be 50 cents.
A half a dollar, is it the same as a half of a cent?
No.
Right.
So a half of a dollar
There
is
we go.
different from a half of a cent. George has got the Verizon rep to concede this ground, yet it seems the only reason this point was clear to the Verizon rep is that lack of decimals and maybe the word of. Throughout this, and the, believe it or not, other 2 calls we have recorded on this exact same issue, the different Verizon reps will repeatedly have an odd hang-up on the decimal expression of the rate, excluding the units, how it looks on paper-wise. Feeling some progress, George starts to
Paper-wise.
explain the issue.
What I was quoted was .002 cents. That's 2/1000ths of a cent per kilobyte.
which is wild.
Okay.
And I specifically
Okay.
asked the rep, I said, are you saying it's $0.002 or .002 cents? Because I recognize that there's a difference.
There's a big difference. We're
Just
not
like there's
talking
a
like
difference
chump
between
change
half a
here.
dollar and half a cent. There's a difference between $0.002 and .002 cents. Your rate in Canada is .002 cents.
At this moment, George realizes how tricky this can be to talk about. He can say the rate is .002 cents,
Decimals
and the
screw
Verizon
people
rep will
over.
agree. But having received the bill, George knows the actual rate is $0.002.
This is the part where he needs to tell
100
them.
times higher, but which is not apparently different to the Verizon reps.
Correct.
It's points.
Yeah. And this is, once they're on the same page, this is the part where George, I think that's his name, tells the rep that he was charged for the dollar instead of the cent decimal, when he was clearly quoted the cent decimal. It's a confusing thing, to be certain, but in the end, it's still misinformation, you know?
Well, okay, it's not true. It's $0.002. You're still quoting me 0.002 cents when in fact it's $0.002 per kilobyte.
Please don't say they're the same.
So if you want to charge me 0.002 cents, I'd be happy to pay the bill. The problem is I was charged $0.002 per kilobyte.
He was promised something else.
It's interesting how much
Okay.
tone and delivery adds to the comedy here. George has just clearly explained the issue and has received a completely stagnant K from
Which
the
you're not
Verizon
allowed to
rep,
do.
who is still unable to perceive a problem. Now, the
You're not
Verizon
supposed to
rep will
just
ask
K
George to get a
the
calculator.
calculator.
And it's perhaps
Oh
at
my
this moment
God.
that it sinks in with George that these people have no clue what any of the numbers actually mean.
So if you take, okay, do you have a calculator with you?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, take this 7179
Oh
Yep.
my
and
God.
divide that by 35,893. That should come out with .002.
Yes. And what units should it be? Dollars or cents?
Well, it's per kilobyte.
It doesn't matter.
Right. And is it dollars or cents per kilobyte?
Well, let me take a look here for you.
It will be 3 minutes before the Verizon rep is able to find the roaming rate in Canada. George sits silently on the line for 50 seconds before once again explaining what rate he was quoted at before his trip and then reiterating where the confusion is.
So my point here is the confusion is on your side.
Mm-hmm.
The first rep I spoke to, the second rep I spoke to, and including you, in calling $0.002 0.002 cents. That's a 100-fold difference. Just like $1 is 100 times different than 1 cent.
Mike doesn't understand this and doesn't respond. A minute passes before he reports the rate.
National roaming access coverage in Canada is .002 per kilobyte cents.
Cents.
Can you say that again?
Is .002 cents per kilobyte.
There needs to be
.002
more.
cents per kilobyte. So you just quoted me
zeros.
again. Your price is .002 cents per kilobyte.
Correct.
Okay.
Tell him
so
your
now
bill.
I'd like you to translate my 35,893 kilobytes into dollars for me, if you would.
Okay. So if you take .002,
Cents, remember. It's cents.
The fact that George
Oh.
insists on inserting the unit as soon as
Yep.
the Verizon rep neglects to mention it tells you he knows exactly where this man's calculations are going.
Cents, remember. It's cents.
Yep, he's got him on lock.
35,896 is $71.79.
No, that would be 71 cents.
Uh-huh.
Yes, this is why your teachers make you write out your units. When you're doing calculations, the units don't just change to what you expect them to be. The speed of an automobile is sometimes measured in kilometers per hour. It's like miles per hour, but less intuitive.
Yep.
If your vehicle travels at a rate of 500 meters per hour for 2 hours, you can't just multiply the rate by time, get 1,000, and put kilometers because that's the unit of distance you expect. The unit of distance you calculated, if you pay attention to the units, is meters. The difference is a factor of 1,000 that's buried in the units and will be forgotten if you confine your entire thought process to button presses on a calculator.
Because you started with a rate per cent. And you multiplied by the kilobytes. So that would be 71 cents.
Yep.
I'll tell you what the problem is here, is you're the original person I spoke to before I used my airtime, and up to including you, are quoting $0.002 per kilobyte as if it's .002 cents per kilobyte, and they're not the same. So I assumed that you guys knew how to do math. No offense here, but I assumed that you knew the difference between .002 cents and $0.002, and it sounds like there's still some confusion about that.
There is. And it's not going to get any better. George is confounded by the Verizon rep's inability to recognize a 100-fold difference between their quoted and actual rates. He then attempts to emphasize the importance of units with an example.
I'll give you a brief example.
Before he gets into his example, I just want to say also, even if you get a rep that can note the difference between the two, the problem is the resolution. How do you resolve this? How do you fix the damage? He's clearly already used the airtime. He's clearly being quoted for 100-fold difference of what he was quoted. How do you resolve this? You can't just credit his account. I mean, I'm sure you probably could. I don't know how Verizon does it, but how would you resolve this? Even if you get someone who knows the difference, you know? Like, how does this get resolved?
If you're selling your car and I said I'm going to give you $20,000 for it, and I showed up with 20,000 pennies, we're not speaking the same language. If you quote me .002 cents, it's not the same as $0.002. So when you just did the math, .002 times 35,893, you came up with 71 cents.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't do the translation from cents to dollars, which would be you'd have to divide by 100. So then you get $0.71.
Yep.
71 cents.
And
So I do understand, even though it seems like maybe you don't, that the rate is, I now understand, $0.002 per kilobyte. But that was not what I was quoted, and that's not how I used my airtime, because I thought it was cheaper than it actually turned out to be, because I was misquoted.
tell him what it was.
After giving this clear and simple example, which doesn't penetrate the mind of the Verizon rep whatsoever, George further detailed the importance of Verizon's error. He's being charged 100 times more than he anticipated, and this problem is exacerbated all the more because his high phone usage was a result of him thinking the rate was a very low 0.002 cents per kilobyte. George proceeds to give the Verizon rep more details of his prior communications about this issue, noting how he even went as far as to have previous reps note the quoted rate in his account. So there's no question about whether or not he misheard
And
the
that was
rate.
good on him to
He heard it
do.
correctly. He was given information that was off by a factor of 100.
Yep.
Since Mike, the Verizon rep, can see this, George is hoping the issue is now apparent. But what he's forgetting is Mike's qualifications.
Can you please write that down in the notes that you quoted me .002 cents? And she did.
Right, and I see that. I see not only one, but I see several reps that have put it in here.
Right. So
Case notes.
I hope it sounds like you may not actually see what the problem is yet, but
Well, I've been working here 2 years, sir.
Oh,
and
no.
I've been a supervisor for almost a year and a half.
Flexing the credentials. Oh my God. Listen, you don't need to flex your credentials. If you're a supervisor, if you've been there for 2 years, then at the very least, you should be able to comprehend what the customer's saying. Even if you outright don't know, or at least don't have it on hand and in your mind, the difference between $0.002 and $0.002 cents, you should be able to make that connection by paying attention to what the customer said, which he's prefacing, by the way, throughout all of this. He's prefacing this whole thing with the difference. He didn't even explain the total amount, which is going to be 100 times more, that he was charged. He didn't explain the bill. He didn't explain that regardless of what they said before, what the other agents had said previously, his bill is still bananas compared to what he thought it was going to be, because it was a misquote, and it caused him to act accordingly to the misquote. You can't do that. You can't tell customers the wrong thing. If you need to verify with someone, verify. And as a matter of fact, what I would have done is I would have asked him, "Sir, would you mind if I put you on a very brief hold for a bit while I confirm with another agent that this is indeed the correct quote?" Because if he's asking and if he's nervous about that, that's a problem. And you need to verify if it's within your means. So, it's just wild.
Yeah.
okay.
Okay. I'm going by what is documented here in the system.
Right.
Rather than thinking for yourself and realizing this is
So-
a mistake.
Can you tell me then if the rate is, as you quoted, 0.002 cents per minute per kilobyte, and I use 35,893 kilobytes, how much should I be charged?
By the way this is calculated, $71.79.
You did your math wrong. That's what I'm saying. Is you bring up your calculator.
I've got the calculator in front of me, sir. If I type in .002 and multiply
But wait,
by
but here's the key. I know, but here's the key. What does the .002 represent? Cents or dollars?
It's cents, sir.
Okay, .002
so
cents.
basically, you're paying 0.2 of a penny.
If it wasn't clear before that Mike hasn't the faintest idea what he's talking about, it certainly is now. He has, in only a few words, said both that the rate is .002 cents and .2 cents.
There's a difference between 0.2 cents and .002 cents. They're 100 times different. So which is the real rate?
.002, sir.
.002 what?
Cents per kilobyte.
Mike is not able to understand this. After George, patient as a saint, tries to clarify his point a little bit more, Mike passes him off to the floor manager, a woman named Andrea, who will be the next person incapable of engaging with the issue beyond computers and calculators.
Oh
This is
boy.
Andrea. I'm a manager on the floor. How can I help you today?
Hi, I think we've got a terminology and mathematics problem going on here, and it seems very basic to me, but I think we're just having a problem because of the numbers involved.
Okay.
Just to summarize, I was quoted, before I entered Canada, I was quoted .002 cents per kilobyte.
Okay.
And just so you know, I have no context for how much you guys charge for data because I have an unlimited plan on the States. So I don't. Someone had mentioned to me I should have known that what it was because of what I pay in the States. But I get unlimited usage in the States, so I don't have any knowledge of that. .002 cents per minute is was quoted to me. My bill reflects .002 dollars per minute.
Rather than cents.
$0.002.
Oh my god.
Yeah, he already knows this call, just like the others, is going nowhere. But a righteous man has to try.
Okay, I think I have to do this again. Do you recognize that there's a difference between $1 and 1 cent?
Definitely.
Do you recognize that there's a difference between half a dollar and half a cent?
Definitely.
It's interesting to note that George is refining his expository ability, as the last time he went through this sort of reasoning, he started his comparison with $0.5 in cents. Now he's beginning with 1, and then stepping into the fractions with the 0.5 example. Andrea follows along, so surely George's final point is going to land.
Then do you therefore recognize that there's a difference between $0.002 and .002 cents?
No.
This phone call is taking place about 5 years after the premiere of Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy 3, the episode of SpongeBob that spawned this infamous meme format
Oh
of
my
someone
God.
agreeing with obvious premises but rejecting the necessary conclusion. And never have I seen a joke spontaneously come to life like this meme just did in this phone call.
No.
That's so funny.
I mean, there's no $0.002.
Of course there's
There's
two.
0.002 cents is what you're quoted, and that's what I do show that you paid. That, you're paying for the kilobyte usage.
He's so
George will
dumb.
not, in fact, be paying for his kilobyte usage, neither $0.002 nor $0.002 cents. But we're still a ways from his happy ending. It seems apparent that this phone call is going to be even more hopeless than the last.
Okay.
Before we continue, little doggy's barking. So, I'm not going to pretend like I have like the end all be all solution for what he could do to like make them understand how big of a screw up this is. Tell him if they're incapable of discerning the smallest denominations, just tell them the biggest ones. Tell them I was not charged what should mathematically be the case for 0.002 cents. I was charged for it for dollars, which is 100 times more. You know, I was charged way more than what was quoted to me. This is the amount. Can you check your billing system to make sure that that indeed is what I owe? And if that's the case, get it corrected somehow, please. You know? Like, I understand educating them is important, and so that way this mistake doesn't ever happen again. But clearly, after 3 different people, it's a lost cause. Find someone who can look into the billing system and confirm the amount. You know? It's not, again, it's not an end-all be-all solution, but it sure is a heck of a lot easier than trying to explain this basic concept to people. Because 3 times now already, they're not, like, differentiating. And it's upsetting. But, like, you gotta try something new at this point. Because otherwise, they're just not gonna get it. And this is gonna keep escalating and escalating and escalating.
I don't know a better way to express this. $0.002 is the same as 0.2 cents.
Right.
Okay. Well, what would $0.002 look to you?
It's
Obviously a dollar is 1.00, right?
Now, the issue I previously mentioned about the Verizon rep's fixation on the decimal representation of the rates rears its head again. A moment ago, it seemed Andrea rejected even the concept of $0.002, saying there is no $0.002. However, she then said George is quoted $0.002 cents. So perhaps she just meant there is no $0.002 anywhere in the records. But her next question
They're going
does
strictly
make it
by
seem
the
like
records.
the concept of $0.002 is, to her, an enigma.
So what would a $0.002 look like?
I don't know.
I've never heard of $0.002.
This is just math we're talking about.
It's
This is
not a full cent.
that's right, and that's right. And 0.002 cents is also not a full cent.
But you were quoted $0.002 cents, not $0.002.
That's correct. But what I was charged.
$0.002 cents is $0.002.
It's difficult to imagine what Andrea thinks the significance is of this sentence. $0.002 cents is $0.002. On one hand, it's an infuriating sentence, as it screams
stopped up.
units don't matter. Dollars, cents, cubic meters
That's what it
used in
screams
prison.
to me, is she's
0.002
stun
is
locked.
0.002. On the other hand, it seems like the reps are attaching a dollar sign to the beginning of every decimal, 1, without acknowledging that they're doing this, and 2, without changing the decimal expressions to account for the dollar sign. I argue this is happening because 1, saying $0.002 cents is $0.002 is meaningless, but saying $0.002 cents is $0.002 is meaningful. It's wrong, but it's clear what's attempting to be expressed here. Just like I might say 5 cents is $0.05. The second piece of evidence this is what's happening follows.
00.
Hold a moment. So, you know what else is happening here? Aside from that weirdo statement, $0.002 is $0.002, that's just her being stun locked because she's trying to process and trying to, like, make sense of it because it's there. Like, the sense of it's rearing its head a little bit, but it's not quite there yet. And so she's a little confused. But the other bigger issue here are the case notes. Namely, remember how the previous rep, the supervisor, said before that multiple agents had already made note of the values that were quoted, the 0.002 cents. They're going specifically by the case notes as though they're gospel. And I understand that from a customer service role, case notes are important for finding a frame of reference for how to fix the problem if it's not resolved. But, like, people are capable of writing incorrect case notes. And if the very first person did an incorrect quote and was requested to put that in the case notes or wherever else, then guess what? Everyone's gonna get it wrong if the first guy got it wrong. That's how that works. I mean, unless they know better, which they should, but they don't. And I don't know why they don't. I'm pretty sure George doesn't know why they don't. I think they're getting tripped up. Like, I'm pretty sure, like, at the end of the day, they know the numerical values, but they're just getting tripped up by the fact that there are decimals in place and that the case notes say that there are cents and not dollars. And, like, they're just getting confused because they think they're in the right in some small way as a result.
Dollars?
No, that's
You gotta
0.002.
hear this. Point 0.002 cents is 2/1000ths of 1 cent. I'm teaching math here.
And I mean, I'm trying to get what you're saying here, but it's just not.
Here's the. Let me cut to the chase.
I already talked to a few different people.
Let me cut to the chase.
I'll
Well,
explain to you that you're being billed 0.002 cents, and if you take
I'm not being billed.
on your calculator, it shows you that it's.
No, it doesn't.
You should let him
You
speak.
never said that you're going to get billed 0.00002 cents.
That's right. You said I was going to get billed 0.002 cents per kilobyte, and I'd be happy to pay that. Now, why don't you bring up your calculator?
Just tell her the actual amount.
And we're
It's
talking about
redundant,
cents, right?
but that's what she needs.
0.002,
Because
and we
that's going to
multiply
be
that
the
by
fastest
the
way to
amount
tell her
of
that there's a
kilobyte
problem.
Usage that you have.
35893.
35893.
I wouldn't have gone through the rigmarole like this. I would have just asked him,
You
how
never did
much
the
were you
conversion
paid?
from cents to
Or how much
dollars.
were you billed? That's what I would have done. I would have said, may I ask, how much are you being billed? If I were somehow incapable of figuring out what the amounts were, like what the difference was, I would have just cut to the chase and asked him, how much is on your statement? How much were you presently billed? And then he'll say the amount, and I'll be like, that's not right. And then that's where he'd probably say, because dollars are not cents. And I'd be like, oh. But that's if I didn't know. And I know. Why don't they know? We're talking about supervisory positions. We're talking about a floor manager here. And I understand, again, the importance of teaching them the difference between dollars and cents and fractions of dollars and fractions of cents. But at this point, you got to get to the point, you know? Otherwise, they're never going to figure it out. And you're just going to be teaching math over and over again.
Talking about cents. We're going to multiply the amount of cents by the amount of kilobytes
Okay,
that you use.
let's-
Not dollars.
let me-
Nobody's mentioning anything about dollars.
Let me start over here.
Did anyone mention anything about dollars? I would have liked to hear George push her on this more, because she just said the calculation comes up to 71.79. She didn't state a unit, but since she doesn't see a discrepancy between this number and what George was billed, it's clear she means dollars. So yes, somebody did mention something about dollars. She did.
Let's just say hypothetically that your rate was 1 cent per kilobyte, right?
1 cent. That would be 0.01.
And now it's clear. She insists on expressing everything as a decimal with a dollar sign in front of it,
Yep.
but without acknowledging that there is a dollar sign in front of it. If she thinks 1 cent is 0.01, then what on earth does 0.002 cents even mean, since she insists on decimal expressions having dollar signs? When she says 0.002 cents, it seems like she is envisioning dollar sign 0.002 cents, which doesn't mean anything. I'd be confused too. Ultimately, the issue for the Verizon reps seems to be the decimal point and the unsaid dollar sign. George doesn't realize they see every number with a dollar sign in front of it, and the reps think a number following a decimal point has to represent cents. Unfortunately, George's current line of argument isn't going to go anywhere, precisely because he allows this detail of 1 cent being written as 0.01 to be largely glossed over. He doesn't acknowledge explicitly that they have just converted to dollars, which really isn't necessary, and is only making things more complicated since the quoted rate is in cents. But let's hear George continue to try explaining the concept of 0.002 cents.
0.002 cents. If you, in pure mathematics, it's the only way I can express this. 0.002 cents is 2/1000ths of 1 cent.
Okay.
Right?
So it's less than a cent, right?
It's very much less than a cent.
Okay.
So 2/1000ths of a cent. So let's start with 2 cents, just like we started with the 1 cent.
Okay, why are we doing 2 cents? We need to be doing 0.002 cents.
George now realizes that even when an adult has the mathematical aptitude,
because he gave a
trying to walk them
hypothetical.
through the mathematics at a pace appropriate for a second grader comes across as patronizing.
I guess my point is that we quoted you 0.002 cents.
That's right.
If you write it down as decimal point 002. So all we
No,
need
it's
to do
not.
with the
This is what I'm saying.
calculator
This is
0.002 and multiply
this
it
is
by
where
the amount of
this is
kilobytes
where you're
that
wrong.
you have.
I don't know how to make this any clearer. Let's try this. Write down 1 cent. How do you write down 1 cent?
0.01.
How do you write down half a cent?
That would be 0.005, I'm assuming.
0.005, I'm assuming. This is the language you use when you know the person you're talking to knows more than you do.
Okay.
That was right. I don't know. I'm not a mathematician. All I'm telling you is I can tell you that with the calculator,
Yeah.
and we take the 0.002, as everybody has told you that you've called in and spoke to.
Yes.
And is our system built
But you said
accordingly,
0.002
it's correct.
cents. Why don't you just write it down on a piece of paper? You have 0.002 cents, not dollars. 0.002 cents.
Understandably, you can feel George's plea coming through his voice. Won't you please just not use a calculator? Just write it down, look at the numbers, and let me
You
explain
gotta show
the
your
units to
work,
you.
too,
Because
otherwise
the
it doesn't
calculator
count.
cannot give you the answer. The calculator can only give you a computation which every customer service rep is failing to interpret correctly. George again tries to explain the issue, but Andrea tells him the computer knows best, and everybody agrees with it, except for him. Her explanation for this difference is enough to make you fall out of your seat.
You guys are quoting $0.002 as if it's cents, simply because there's a decimal point involved.
Mm-hmm.
We're not quoting $0.002. We're quoting 0.002 cents.
Oh, God. Honestly.
I mean, the computer is calculating the figure here.
I know it is.
And we are calculating
It's
the
a
figure. We're all
terminology
coming up
issue.
with the same thing except for you.
0.002 cents is different than $0.002. I'm being charged $0.002 per kilobyte. $0.002 is 2/10 of 1 cent.
Okay. Well, I mean, it's obviously a difference of opinion.
It's not
Oh
opinion.
my
That the bill for
God.
the data usage is entirely correct.
Opinion. Opinion. Opinions have no place in mathematics. Even I know this. No. I need to step away for a moment. This is just ridiculous. This is ridiculous. George, I don't know what you have to do. Give them the direct price. If you can, request that you can pull up a copy of your statement or take a picture of your bill or something. 'Cause some people cannot be taught. Some people should not be taught. Because they're living in the moment. They're thinking of their tech. They're thinking of the calculators. They're thinking of the case notes or whatever. They're thinking of the original quote, the sense. They're thinking of all these things they're so sure of. Just show them your bill, please. They're not gonna learn. Maybe if you just show them the results of the gross miscalculation or just the misquote, that maybe they'll begin to think and maybe they'll begin to understand. And again, George is not the person at fault here. At the end of the day, it was the Verizon rep, the original Verizon rep's fault for setting all of this in motion. George was right to ask for that to be written down. The problem is the original agent was misinformed, and everyone else is playing the lemming. Everyone else is just going with it because it sounds like it makes sense. And I just don't know. I don't know anymore. Some people just won't get it. Let's just keep going.
Okay, well, you know what? I'm going to post this recording on my blog.
Ooh.
It's a difference of opinion. And her opinion is that George's bill, which is 100 times higher than he was told, is correct. George says after he posts it to his blog, maybe Verizon can learn some basic math. He, frustratedly, continues telling her what they're getting wrong and, with an immortal fighting spirit, gives yet another basic example to illustrate that yes, in fact, units matter.
It would be like, another example, half of a meter is very different than half of a centimeter. Half of a centimeter is written 0.5 cm. Half of a meter is 0.5 m. They're two very different things. You can't just say 0.002 m equals 0.002 cm. They're 100-fold different. The problem here is that you're not even acknowledging now that there's a difference between 0.002 when you're talking about dollars and 0.002 cents. My assumption was it was 0.002 cents because that's what you told me, but it's been calculated on my bill as $0.002 or 2/10 of a cent per kilobyte, which is different than 2/1000ths of a cent.
And
per
that's
kilobyte.
what you should have opened up with.
Well, again, we're not going to be able to make any adjustments to the bill because it is correct. And I do apologize if there was obviously miscommunication.
Oh my God. She's
Okay, is there someone I can escalate this to?
I don't think there are.
By the end of the call,
I don't think there's
George had
anyone
been
left
trying to explain that
that can talk to you.
$0.002 and $0.002 are different to adults with jobs
But
for
I'd still
well
try.
over an hour. Andrea said the bill was correct, even though we know that it was wrong by a factor of 100. It's not surprising to read on George's blog, then, that at this point, the level of ignorance and ineptitude he had been faced with was a far greater motivator than the $72 they charged him. Per Andrea's instructions, George contacted Verizon once again through their online support forum, and the next day received this response. Here they reiterate that the pricing, which is wrong by a factor of 100, is in fact correct. For the time that he spent attempting to teach the Verizon employees basic mathematics, they give him half off his 100 times oversized bill.
That's
George is not
not
satisfied
right.
and sends this reply. In this reply, George describes the mistake that was made and says how he has had great difficulty in explaining to the customer service reps that there is a difference between $0.002 and $0.002. The other interesting thing he mentions is a suggestion that they would have a much more easily interpretable rate if they made it per megabyte instead of per kilobyte. Per megabyte, the rate would be a more normal number of $2.05. 2 days later, George receives another reply from Verizon. Now, still without acknowledging their mistake, aside from providing their actual correct rate, they give George a full refund. This is still unsatisfactory, though, since it's
'Cause they're
clear
gonna
that
make the same
Verizon
mistake
doesn't
again.
understand basic math well enough to be involved in quoting and charging people any rate for anything. If it happened to George, it could happen to you.
And most people at this point would have just given up and just been like, yeah, you know, it's fine. Everything's fine now. Just whatever. But no, people gotta know that this is wrong. People gotta understand that there is math to be done. And they're not doing it. These reps just aren't thinking.
Sure enough, the
And I
very
don't know
same
why.
day, December 10th, George posts again on his blog with a link to a recent post on a home theater forum where someone has had this exact same issue. This is an unfortunate fellow named Peter, and he describes the same exact difficulty. And he mentions that Verizon
Oh my
seems to
God.
have an endless supply of mathematically challenged employees. The next day, Monday, December 11th, George finally receives a response from Verizon where they admit their mistake. Sure, Verizon was overcharging their customers 100-fold, but at least it wouldn't happen again. 3 days later, on December 14th,
It happens
2006,
again?
this phone call from the same day was posted to YouTube.
Good. The other thing is, once in a while I travel to Canada, and I was wondering, is that still unlimited, or?
Well, it's gonna be it's gonna be 0.002 per kilobyte.
0.002 what?
Of access.
Zero.
0.002 per
Uh,
kilobyte.
Okay, is that cents or dollars?
Cents.
Cents. Okay.
Yeah, cents.
So it's 0.002 cents.
0.002
0.002 cents.
cents per kilobyte.
Cents. Okay. 0.002 cents per kilobyte.
No.
Okay, I got it right.
In 10 days, George's blog was visited over 220,000 times, and his situation went viral. On December 9th, 2006, Consumerist.com posted the audio of George's phone call to YouTube, and it became the
Dang,
top-rated
that's a
post
throwback.
that day, and the top-rated of the month in the news and blogs category, with over 360,000 views. It was covered all over the web: Wall Street Journal, Reddit, MSNBC, a Harvard professor of economics, and more. There was a remix contest, a t-shirt contest, and at some point in early 2007, Verizon conceded to George's advice and finally began quoting the Canadian roaming rate as $2.05 per megabyte. Even Peter from the home theater forums finally had his situation resolved in early 2007. This was really the onset of the internet age we know today. It was when the people, for the first time in some way, had the power. A company could scam their customers, purposefully or not, and be held accountable in front of hundreds of thousands of people. They could be inundated with complaints and explanations of their error. People the world over, for a moment, could come together to point and laugh. Through the experiences and creativity of real people, with Reddit, YouTube, MySpace, Facebook, and Wikipedia, all existing for over a year at this point, user-generated content would prove to be the greatest asset the internet had. It was fitting then that on Christmas Day 2006, Time magazine named the Person of the Year you, or us. Now, almost 20 years later, it can't be said that everyone has got a lot better at math, but hey, at least we still have the internet, right?
Yeah. Godspeed, George. Oh my God, no. Oh no. And look where we're at now.
Subscribe to Wrath of Math for the swankiest math videos on the internet.
Yes. Give them a sub. Give them a like. This was fantastically brain-rotting, and I'm going to write a meaningful comment here. Great video. As a former customer service rep, not sales/billing, I would have asked what the bill came out to be and made a note of the discrepancy before pushing for a fix. That said, there is no excuse for not knowing dollar to cent differences. Thanks for the laughs and Godspeed, George. Okay. That's just... Honestly, I don't even... I can't even begin to, like, comprehend why anyone would just not, like, try and think, like, maybe this guy's onto something, because he said this multiple times to multiple different people. I'm also going to... I'm also going to give a like to this video where the source audio came from, because this is just so funny. Man. Alright. That does it for this video. Thank you very much for watching. If you want to see more reactions, please let me know. I'm not exactly a reaction channel, but this was actually kind of fun. Thank you again. Try to be kind to your customer service reps while also at the same time try to hold them accountable for their BS. Otherwise, you're going to get scammed by accident. Thank you again, and I'll see you another time. Have a good one.